On this week's episode of the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry and Dr. Cormac Moore, we're discussing dirty dancing. Yes, 100 years ago, the Catholic Church condemned, in the strongest possible terms, modern dancing. They threatened to excommunicate people who went to dance halls. They said dance halls, newspapers and bad pictures threatened to ruin the Irish people. We'll be discussing the 5th anniversary of the foundation of the SDLP. And we'll also be discussing the Birmingham Six case, which came to prominence again in 1975.
August the 18th, 1925. Dance ban. Church campaign against vice dens. It will be recalled that a few weeks ago, in a message to his clergy, His Grace Most Reverend Dr. O'Donnell, Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of All Ireland, condemned in strong terms modern dancing, urging them to do all in their power to put a stop to it in their various districts, and threatening excommunication for those who attend such places where it was carried on. Since then, the clergy, especially in Dundalk and district, of which the Primate made special mention, have taken the matter up strongly, and at the Masses on Saturday and Sunday last, appealed to the congregations to boycott such dance dens. Reverend H. Tobel, B.D., St. Patrick's, Dundalk, in his sermon referred particularly to the evils of foreign dancing. A man of practically no religion, recently writing in the English papers, stated that modern dances were borrowed from the most degraded pagan tribes of Africa. Stated that and it was a mystery to him, Father Tobel, how boys and girls could participate in those dances without sin. He referred to the evils consequent on young people attending dance halls, which were not under proper control, and appealed to parents to keep proper supervision over their children in this respect.
Fantastically read there by Dr. Cormac Moore. Welcome to this edition of the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry, and Dr. Cormac Moore.
Hello.
How are you, sir? You well?
All good, all good.
That was beautifully read, and what a piece of literature, as it were. What an astonishing article from 1925 in the Irish News this day, 1925. The Irish History Boys, for those of you who don't know, takes articles from the Irish News from 100 years ago and 50 years ago and debates and discusses them. By the way, before we start this episode, we're back in studio. Did you enjoy our live show?
I did, yeah.
We were in Fela and Fobble a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
I had a really good time, I think.
So did I. I think the audience enjoyed it.
Yes.
They seemed to anyway.
The touts outside, the tickets were going for a grand. It was like Oasis. It was
just like Oasis.
It's just like Oasis.
Yeah, just remind me
Except
of that.
we get on. We like each other.
But do Liam and Noel not get on now? No? I don't know.
Yeah, with the same sort of money as well. No, we thoroughly enjoyed it. But we're back in studio, ladies and gentlemen. The Irish History Boys, we debate all sorts of things and interesting articles, but this is absolutely fascinating because it's kind of it's revelatory in terms of the power of the church, the ability of the church to think that they can just issue an edict and people will stop dancing.
Yeah.
But some of the language is seems way over the top. The Catholic Church threatening to literally excommunicate people
I know.
for dancing.
Well, it wasn't just, it was dance halls, filthy newspapers, and bad pictures as well,
which were threatening to ruin the Irish people.
But that was now. It wasn't just the Catholic Church. It was my first book. I'm sure you've read, Tim, is the GAA versus Douglas Hyde, the removal of Ireland's first president as GAA patron for going to a soccer match.
Right.
So just months after he was inaugurated, he went to a soccer match, and the GAA removed him as patron because it was against their ban on foreign games.
Right.
Not only just playing them, but being a spectator at a match as well could see you banned from the GAA. And so, and the Gaelic League and the GAA and politicians were against foreign dances in particular.
Right.
And jazz for some reason. Jazz in the 20s was seen as the most evil of all dances. Very sexual in connotation. It was derived from Africa. It was seen as very explicit.
Quite an overt racist element to this, isn't it?
Oh,
foreign
very
dancing,
overt.
Basically, black people dancing. That sort of, and it's influencing our pure Gaelic Irish culture.
Yeah, and the pagan tribes of Africa, as mentioned this one. This was mentioned a lot during the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah.
And there was a huge amount of attempts to stop these dances.
Right.
It was claimed there was a 29%, almost 30% increase in births outside of marriage from 1912 to 1927.
Right.
And the Catholic Church put it down to
dancing.
Foreign dances.
Yeah.
As one of the reasons, as well as being open very late.
Yeah.
So, they're going on at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And Cardinal O'Donnell is mentioned here, but his successor, Joseph McRory, he actually said, would it be nice to have a nice, respectable evening? You still, men and boys and girls can meet each other. But it's closed at 11 or 12, a respectable hour.
Okay.
They're not going to be lured behind dishes and the likes and make sorrowful moments that last for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying, the 30s.
Yeah, I love some of the language that young people should avoid those occasions of sin. I haven't heard that phrase in a long time.
Yeah.
An occasion of sin, which is an opportunity to sin. Oh, have you ever seen me dancing, by the way?
No.
Well,
no.
you're very well.
I
When
would
I
like that,
dance,
would I?
when I dance, my friend, it is not necessarily an occasion of sin. It is more an occasion of ridicule. I do not dance. There is no sin when I dance.
Well, I'm not a great. I have a leash shuffle. It's not really a sight to behold. But
yeah, but I mean, you read it now 100 years later, and it seems completely over the top.
Completely over the top. Yeah.
But presumably, at the time, a lot of people would have agreed with this and said, "Yeah, the young people are out of control. They don't like this influence coming from America, but they think they can stop the tide." And clearly, they mean filthy newspapers, as you say, dance halls, filthy newspapers, and bad pictures.
And the censorship laws were pretty rigid and extreme in Ireland.
Is this an example of the power of the Catholic Church at the time? And people would say, when the Free State came in, it was going to become a Catholic state for Catholic people, and this is the Church kind of wielding the crozier.
An element, but again, we shouldn't say it was just the Catholic Church that believed in this.
Yeah.
So this was actually quite prevalent across Europe, across Western society. So there was loads of revolts against foreign dancing in France, in Hungary, in Britain, in America, and even in America, where a lot of this dancing was formed, there was a lot of opposition to it, and using the same type of very incidentary language against dancing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just now perhaps the Catholic Church was most vocal in Ireland, and that does suggest they had a lot more power than in other jurisdictions, for example. But the language they were using wasn't dissimilar to language used in other jurisdictions. But this went on for the 20s, 30s. It only really stopped in the 1930, I think it was 36, where the Public Dance Halls Act was passed. And so basically you couldn't have a dance without either the Catholic Church, the Gardaí, or the judiciary agreeing to it. The Holy Trinity of
the Catholic Church, the Guard.
So you couldn't have a dance if you didn't have agreement from those bodies. So that really stopped but there was a lot of hypocrisy as well. Like as I said with my first book, the GA was against foreign dances and it had a ban on foreign dances, but it was never observed.
The GA had a ban on foreign dances, not just sport.
No. So you couldn't have a foreign dance in a GA club, but loads did, and the GA turned a blind eye to it. Because I tell you why? Because it earned more money than KLE or traditional dances.
Whoa! Are you saying that the GA is interested in money? I won't hear that.
I won't hear that. Well, in the 30s, they were they didn't do anything, but because this came up when Douglas Hyde was removed as patron, when the President of Ireland was removed as patron, it caused a huge controversy. And a lot of people, critics of that decision, said, "Well, what if you turn a blind eye to foreign dancing? Why didn't you turn a blind eye to this? This has created a huge amount of embarrassment and humiliation for the GA. You could have easily turned a blind eye to this, as you've done with foreign dancing." And even to use the Irish language, the GA, often pretended it was very interested in the use of the Irish language, but actually did. Like one guy who was up for being removed from the GA for attending a foreign match. When I say a foreign match, a foreign game, it was either rugby, soccer, cricket, or hockey. If you played golf, that was fine.
Golf, good.
Or tennis, that was fine.
That's not Saxon, that's Scottish.
Yeah, exactly. So when it was foreign, it meant English. But anyway, one guy turns up at one of these meetings to discuss his case, and he speaks in Irish. And there was no one there to listen to. So, it had to be reconvened.
Very good. What I find astonishing is that they're threatening excommunication for those who attended places where it was carried on. This dancing excommunication. Now, I remember during the Irish Civil War, it was quite a big deal.
You remember the Irish Civil War?
Stop that. I remember during the Irish Civil War, it was quite a big deal that the Catholic Church excommunicated the Republicans who were carrying on the Civil War, and it was seen as a massive thing. And you go, well, they're carrying on a civil war, and they're carrying out what they say what the Church would describe as acts of terrorism against the democratic will of the people. How can you compare that to having a wee dance? It seems outrageously.
It does seem outrageous. I don't know if it actually was carried out.
I was going to say, was anybody ever excommunicated for jiving?
I hope not, but it it wouldn't surprise me as well. But yeah, this was as I said going on for throughout the 1920s, 1930s. There was a massive protest meeting in Mohill and Leitrim in the mid 30s.
Right.
Anti-jazz meeting.
Anti-jazz
supported by the Catholic Church, supported by the Cardinal, the Primate of All Ireland, Joseph McCrory at the time, supported by Eamon de Valera, supported by Douglas Hyde, who himself would fall foul of bans and boycotts a few years after that. So it was very prevalent, and jazz in particular was like Sean McEntee. He became finance minister when Fianna Fáil came to power in 1932. He supported broadcasting of jazz on the radio. And he was accused by jazzing every night of the week, and a particularly derogatory term. So this was, if you showed any support for it or even allowed for certain modern music to be played, whether in broadcast or in dance halls, you were accused of a serious vice.
I suppose it seems ridiculous just now, 100 years later, but they do seem to think that they can't stop this. They can't stop this wave of vice coming. They can't stop modern music. They can't stop modern films. They're not really, but they don't really see what's coming, do they?
They don't really but they do stop it for a while because of true censorship. You don't.
Well, but yeah, of course there were lots of books censored
and movies. Yeah, but loads of books. Yeah. Look at career of James Joyce or Frank O'Connor. Who lived in Ireland for a large part of his life. Lots of his books were banned because they were anti-Catholic in many respects, and I questioned. The Catholic Church's true morality, I suppose, in certain cases, and most of them are banned. So he often had to look elsewhere to get employment, either in England or America. So that was prevalent for decades and decades. Yeah. It was very prevalent. And dancing was too. Like dancing, the Public Dance Halls Acts did see a lot of this curbed. Yeah. Because it became...
Well, even when I was 70s and 80s, when I went to school, there's still the power of the Catholic Church and this obsession with sex, and particularly girls. And when they were taught by nuns, they had to have skirts of a certain length, and they were told if a boy sat on their knee that they should put a telephone directory between them and the young gentleman, things like that.
Seriously, 100%.
Oh yeah,
a telephone directory.
Yeah, a telephone directory between you and a gentleman who's sitting on your knee. I remember, girls of my age.
Well, what's this just now? No one has telephone directories anymore.
This is 70. Well, nobody has a telephone directory.
So what was this? An Argos
put
catalog
your iPhone in,
they're gone too.
Argos catalog, you're giving your age away there. But so that's kind of morality it was still prevalent right up until the late 80s. I suppose the power of the Catholic Church didn't really dissipate until sort of the early 90s and
we had a conversation before, Bishop Eamon Casey and into all the paedophilia cases in the 90s. Yeah, just
but right up until the 90s, they were still railing against sort of modern advances in music and things like that.
And they still do, I presume, but they just don't have the power anymore. They're not listened to. Even the Irish News, for example, it was a very Catholic newspaper 50 years ago. Yeah. If you read some of the editorials, it's very proud of its Catholicism and its Christianity, and really emphasise that a lot in its editorials for pretty much I wouldn't say every week now, but almost every week there's a strong team running through of it being a very proud Catholic newspaper and listening with reverence to what bishops and cardinals are saying.
I suppose if the young people today would go, who? The most grace? His grace? The most reverend? What? Why we're listening to it? It just seems, bizarre to young people today that somebody like that would have an influence.
But they had a huge influence on Irish society.
Irish News, good Catholic people. That's why they were anti-Parnellites, weren't they, of course?
Of course, yeah.
Parnell,
as we discussed in our recent live show.
But they were started, but the Irish News started in 1891 as an anti-Parnell paper, presumably pro-Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church had condemned Parnell for his affair with Catherine O'Shea.
With practice, we get rid of the tendency to go Parnell. But I found it fascinating. I had a chapter in my book in GA versus Douglas Hyde devoted to that.
Many times have you mentioned that book?
Well, it's out of print, so it doesn't really matter. It was published in 2012. But it was about kind of the new state. Kind of this is a kind of an element that happens straight after statehood comes in for 26 counties. Yeah. That there is this kind of push to to be very Irish. This Irish Ireland movement was
Yes.
very strong. Whether it was sport, whether it was language,
We're
whether
a
it was
different
dancing.
nation. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not just going to paint our post boxes green. We're
Exactly,
going to be
yeah.
different people and speak our own language and dance our own dances and play our own sport and read
Yeah,
our own
yeah.
books and all of that. Yeah.
And be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
That was a big thing at the time.
Economically, yeah.
Economically self-sufficient. And dancing formed part of that. And that wasn't necessarily anti-English. It was more anti-foreign dances, and a lot of them were American, particularly jazz. And we said there was a lot of erasure, not even undertones, overtones. Like it was
Oh no, it's
very
blatantly
explicitly racist. A lot of the language used.
Yeah.
But it was really prominent for what, say, a decade and a half anyway.
Yeah.
That to stop this kind of evil vice dens of foreign
Well,
dancing.
the last paragraph in the article, it said His Grace was very greatly perturbed by the scandals going on at Black Rock. And
In
it was stated-
Dundalk, that is.
And
yeah.
it was stated that if he did not cease, His Grace would exercise his powers vested in him by the church to put an end. What were the scandals going on at Black Rock? I mean,
I presume it was
just the dancing?
Well,
All right,
or-
there's nothing-
what were boys and girls getting up to at the dancing? You know,
Holding
were
hands at the
their
back of the
bodies
dance
too close to each other when they were jiving? You know,
Yes.
it was a very
a lack of telephone directories in the area.
or Argos catalogues.
Snogging at the back, curtain.
Well, it was often about. I know Cardinal McGrory.
Shifting. Was there shifting going on?
Cardinal McGrory was talking about people outside the dance hall going to ditches and back country back roads and the likes, and there was all kinds of activity happening that was totally unacceptable.
Right.
And they blamed it on one of the main reasons for births outside of marriage was because of these dances. That was a reason. And what happened to those children? We know now. With the Magdalene laundries and so many other institutions, they were shoved out of society.
Yeah, well, that's a different story altogether. Thank God this is slightly lighter, but yeah, there is a darker side to this sort of thing, isn't there? You know, that this does seem utterly ridiculous, and
it does. It's very,
25, but
the language used. That's the one thing that kind of really strikes you. The language used is so extreme. It's so kind of outrageous. The language.
that we would be as pagan in a few generations if they kept this dancing up. They would be as pagan as the ancient Romans.
Yeah, or as pagan as the African tribes currently, as they saw it. But it was a big issue, and it was very prevalent, and it wasn't just the Catholic Church; it was politicians. Well, obviously, an act was brought in 1936 under a Fianna Fáil government that if you want to have a dance, you have to get approval from the Catholic Church, the Gardaí, and the judiciary.
And the judiciary.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. It's cheered me up no end.
I feel like dancing now.
Well, no, see, I'm just very lucky. I couldn't dance. I would have been all right.
Oh, you would have been fine.
I'd have been fine. No occasion of sin when I'm involved.
No, and an occasion of sin back then as well. It wasn't just sinning. It was thinking about a sin as well.
An occasion of sin is very different from the actual sin. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. And thinking about it.
Well, I think that's slightly different, but the occasion of sin is giving an opportunity for sin. I think
Yeah.
Ladies dancing to jazz. 1975, August 22nd, SDLP. The Social Democratic and Labour Party is 5 years old and is proudly celebrating. The SDLP last night celebrated the 5th anniversary of its foundation with the message to its supporters and followers: "We will repay the trust you have put in us." Jerry Fitt was speaking at a special occasion to mark the 5th anniversary. That he couldn't guarantee the success of the current inter-party talks, but they would make every effort to see that they could reach a solution through compromise, a solution which would be satisfactory to all. The SDLP at 5. I think it was the same year the DUP and the Alliance Party were all formed in 1970. I think they were.
Was DUP a bit later? Was it?
The DUP might have been slightly later.
I think the Alliance Party was 70 or
1970. Yeah.
I think DUP was I think the DUP and Vanguards were they the same year or?
Yeah. So the SDLP formed in 1970, year after the Troubles broke out. What had happened before? The old Nationalist Party.
The old Nationalist Party, Ed McAteer, and there
were a couple of independent sort of nationalists. But
there was a lot of different. There was a Republican club. State started in the 60s. They were actually proscribed under the North. But it was very incoherent. It was the old Nationalist Party, really, the kind of the rumps of Joe Devlin's party that were there. But and Labour actually would have got a lot of nationalist vote as well at that time. They were a strong enough group they would not regularly, semi-regularly get people elected to different bodies like the Stormont and local government. The Northern Irish Labour Party.
Northern Ireland Labour Party. My good
yeah.
friend Michael McDowell, his father was in the NILP. He was quite a big wig in the NILP in its day, and it did quite well.
It did. So obviously the SDLP would have been seen as like Jerry Fitt in particular would have been seen very much a Labour man.
Yeah.
And the first leader of the SDLP, so they would have taken a lot of that vote, say from Catholic Labour supporters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was.
Did you? This is true. There was actually quite a big debate in the party, what to call the party, whether Labour should go with Social Democrat or should be Social Democrat Labour Party. And the reason they went for Social Democrat Labour Party was because they went Labour Social Democratic Party. It will be the LSD party. And when the LSD was quite popular in the late 60s, early 70s, and they decided that wasn't necessarily the way to go.
That was a wise move.
That was a wise move. So that's genuinely why they were the Social Democratic and Labour Party.
You wish that some other people would take that advice on board. So some people name their organisations and it has bad connotations for other reasons. But yeah, so look, it was 5 years. I think it's fair to say it did very well.
Yeah.
After 5 years, it definitely became the voice of nationalism, electorally anyway.
Yeah.
Had huge swathes of national support by then, and it definitely was on its path to changing the trajectory of getting a solution. I think or not necessarily compromise, but just something that could be acceptable to both communities.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of there was always this kind of contradiction. It's always a nationalist party.
Yeah.
It's always a Catholic nationalist party, but it always wants to be a Social Democrat and Labour Party. But they were never really able to cross that divide. Were they? I mean, they would get modicum of Protestant support, modicum Unionist support, but basically it was a Catholic nationalist party saying we need power sharing. It was always anti-violence. It was always anti-IRA, which is why it was hated and loathed by the IRA and Republicans. And I remember it was in 1981. Jerry Fitt was literally burnt out of his own house in the bottom of the Antrim Road near where I lived during the hunger strikes. SDLP were driven out of various areas, especially later on in the late 70s and stuff.
Even John, I've read Stephen Walker's biography of John Hume, and how many times was his house attacked?
Yeah,
and sometimes by Republicans as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, it was a. But look, John Hume, obviously, like Jerry Fitt leaves in the late 70s, as is Paddy Devlin. He was another senior figure.
Jerry Fitt left because he thought they were going too green.
Yeah.
So they were too nationalist rather than concentrating on.
And he was also annoyed that they were putting in Joe Hendren in Belfast West, his constituency, and that split the SDLP vote, or the kind of constitutional nationalist vote, and that allowed for Gerry Adams to get elected as MP in 1983 for the first time. So that there was that as well, that local kind of politics at play, which always happens in political parties. But like and then obviously it does become John Hume's party, really, doesn't it? Like he becomes.
I always remember Seamus Mallon being. There were a couple of big hitters.
There was, but with John, I know there's friction between Mallon and Hume, but I growing up, you always considered John Hume's party. Certainly the trust of its platform, what it was trying to achieve. Definitely seemed to have taken most of the leadership from John Hume. His single transferable speech, the three strands that he introduced. It wasn't just about power sharing. It was north, south, east, west, nationalist, unionist. It was that was definitely John Hume, and he'd been going on about that for quite a while before it happened in the 90s.
But they can proudly say during the entire history of the Troubles that they were always anti-violence. They never, supported violence in any shape, form, or they always condemned it from whatever quarter. And I know Seamus Mallon very strongly anti-IRA, but always so very, very strongly anti-security court force violence, and called out, A, collusion, and B, before it became very popular to call it collusion, but also security forces excesses, which didn't make him very popular with unionists. But the unionists still saw it as a kind of the SDLP. We're talking about 1975 here. We're going to talk about the convention when there was the power sharing executive has collapsed in 1974. The British government, nobody really knows what to do. Unionists won't accept power sharing, won't accept the Council of Ireland. What do we do now? Who runs Northern Ireland? The men of violence are running amok. The SDLP are saying...
And they're policing areas themselves as well.
But the SDLP are proposing power sharing, but unionists kind of go, well, the SDLP are just, the sort of polite face of the IRA, the polite face of Republicans. They're nationalists. They want to bring down the state.
Yeah.
So they won't accept even the SDLP. Who are
It's interesting because you talk about the convention. There was a split. We'll talk about that in an episode later on. But the split within unionism between William Craig and Ian Paisley, and most unions stayed with Paisley. Anti-power sharing. A lot of them are saying we're not going in with Republicans.
Yes.
And they weren't talking about the IRA or Sinn Féin. They're talking about the SDLP.
Yes.
So there is this belief because they're Catholics and they're nationalists, and the SDLP was a nationalist party.
Yeah.
Now it was often in a bind. It didn't want to come across as too nationalist because a part of its raison d'etre was to bring the communities together. It was trying to get reconciliation, get talking amongst the communities.
Yeah.
So it didn't want to play the green card too much sometimes, but often felt it had to as well. A lot of other times because of what the nationalist community, overall nationalist community, thought of what was happening to it.
Yeah.
Whether it was acts of violence like Bloody Sunday changed everything. This is only 2 years, less than 2 years after the SDLP is formed.
Yeah.
It has to deal with events outside of its control.
It has a famously, they called the rent and rate strike, didn't they, after the internment in 1971. The SDLP supported the rent and rate strike for a few years, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, up until Sunningdale, I think, around then. Yeah.
So they had to play, in inverted commas, the green card, but they were just reflecting the views of their community and trying to take away from the IRA, which had no political wing at this stage. If you remember, kind of the IRA didn't really get involved in politics until after the hunger strike in 1981.
Yeah, the Sinn Féin didn't.
They had a political.
They had Republican clubs, and they had. There was some involvement electorally, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a big strategy. It was only with Adams and Danny Morrison and people that actually really see it as we can actually do well here in elections from the hunger strikes onwards. And it becomes a specific strategy.
So the SDLP were sitting in councils and sitting in, well, Stormont wasn't sitting, but it would have sat in Stormont when it was sitting, whereas the Shinners and Republicans had no real representation in any of these bodies at all.
Well, it does remind me going back to 100 years, to now, I suppose, with 1918, and like one of the reasons why Sinn Féin did so well in the 1918 general election. This is a different Sinn Féin, obviously. This is the Sinn Féin from the ashes of the Easter Rising, actually. It accuses the old constitutional Irish Party of, yes, it's meeting all these people, it's sitting in all these bodies, it's accepting the rule of the British, accepting all these bodies, but what's it achieving? It's actually making our case weaker, and there's no compromise on the other side. And Joe Devlin, actually, who's one of the most famous constitutional nationalists of the last 100 years, he was saying it himself. Look, what have we achieved? All we've done is lost the support of our own community, and there's been no compromise on the other side at all. So you could see where some nationalists say from a Republican background were going, okay, what is the SDLP doing? It's just giving credence and legitimacy to British institutions, to Northern Ireland institutions, by accepting them, working with them. And what is it achieving? Has it benefited us as a community?
Yeah, but
it only comes really to fruition in the 90s in many respects. With when you see the peace process, and that is an SDLP document more than any other party.
100%
has legitimacy to the Good Friday Agreement. That is a John Hume SDLP document right in front of it, and that's the drum they've been banging for decades.
20 years.
Seamus Mallon famously said, Sunningdale, it was or Good Friday Agreement is Sunningdale for slow learners.
Yeah, 24 years later.
The
Republicans used to call them the Stoops. The stoop down low party. Isn't that great? It's kind of, you forced that, isn't it? The stoop down low party. But they used to call them the Stoops.
But what was the IRA called? I ran away,
very briefly, in the 69, but the Stoops, and they really, really didn't like the SDLP. They kind of,
No, they didn't,
but then they took all their clothes and said, we're a completely Good Friday Agreement. And that's one of the things they say about John Hume. He's kind of, he knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He knew that, basically, if
the Sinn Féin would swallow them up.
Sinn Féin would swallow them up, and if they got a deal on Northern Ireland and got power sharing up and running, that why do you need an SDLP when you can go properly green and get your.
Yeah, I still think there's a need. I think. It's shown because the Good Friday Agreement is a very resilient document. It's thankfully stopped pretty much all of the violence that was there beforehand. But there still is a lot of work to be done. We're far from that.
Well,
happy, peaceful
you
society.
think of where they are in 1975 here, and they're celebrating. I don't know what they were like, but they were the major nationalist parties. They were in power. Briefly, they were in power for
briefly,
5 months in 1974 in a power-sharing executive. They had ministers and stuff like that. And look at them now in 2025. They are in opposition. They have about, how many MLAs do they have? About 8 out of 90?
8,
no?
I think they had 13 or something before that.
So
they've done well in Westminster. Like, I think 2019 when Colin Eastwood and Claire Hanna won resoundingly in Foyle and South Belfast. That was a bit of a shock. That they won so convincingly. I know there's the whole, and they retained their seats as well. There's
always local elements to that sort of thing. But
but obviously it was the whole Brexit thing as well. But they retained their seats as well, though. Obviously there's Sinn Féin's in turmoil in that kind of constituency in Derry. But there's still think there's a part to play. They're in opposition. Obviously, they're very weak opposition. Not because of the calibre of the people in the party. It's more to do with the numbers. They're tiny numbers in the assembly. So there's only so much they can do, and have to pick and choose, what battles to fight and what to bring up. So it's and there's so many to choose from, because Sinn Féin is now the largest party, and that actually holds big trouble for it, because it's the largest party. It is the voice of nationalism in many respects now, but it's in government, and it can only bang this drum for so long that this is a partitionist state. It's all Britain's fault. It's we're forced into this situation. Like, it's going to have to take up some responsibility. Some days nationalists might go. A big swathe of nationalists might go. What is Sinn Féin doing? You can't just keep on blaming someone else when there are legitimate choices you can make.
Keep calling for a border pool. Well, what's interesting, in 1975, this is Eddie Haughey, who's a major figure in the party, speaking in 1975. About it is understandable that we should be proud of our achievement, for it's been a remarkable one. We haven't just achieved or even revolutionised nationalist and republican politics in the north, we have created it. Before this, there was nothing. We haven't just pushed anti-partition politics to the left, we've created a Labour Party. We haven't just given a coherent political expression to the minority situation in Northern Ireland, we have formulated a concept of Irish nationality that has won small but significant and growing support from across the traditional divide. So they're basically claiming that up until 1970 there was no nationalist representation, which is true to an extent.
He's bigging it up. He's bigging it up a lot. He really is. He's
there was no nationalist and republican politics in the north.
They were coherent. They definitely played a huge role in bringing about peace in Northern Ireland and representing the minority viewpoint. Politically. So I think the SDLP definitely should be proud of their history. And with John Hume, would have arguably one of the greatest people of the last 100 years. Who led them. And do you remember do you remember when he was talking to Adams, Gerry Adams, in the early, the late 80s,
Hume
early
Adams
90s?
Talks, he was lambasted on all sides.
I remember in particular, the Sunday Independent went out of its way to lambast Hume for talking to Adams. Even though at the time British government circles were doing it, and as it was the Irish government. But Hume was very courageous there, and he was right. Of course, he was right to do it. And it's only been now we talk with hindsight, how wonderful a man he was. But at the time, he was vilified for that.
Well, you don't resolve conflicts by not speaking to the people who are doing the conflicting. Think. He was right, and history will judge him very kindly, I think.
And do you think the SDLP has a future?
I'm not sure. I genuinely don't know. I think they've good, bright people in there. Claire Hanna and stuff like that.
Claire Hanna is generally accepted as a very good leader. Very articulate. She comes across very well in the media.
The current Matthew Toole in the.
He gave me a lovely review of my book in the Irish Times, so I'm a big fan.
Matthew Toole, you make it a free book.
I think I already has.
Did you give him?
No, I didn't. The Irish Times gave it to him.
Oh right, the Irish Times. Okay. Well,
so
that's how you judge. That's how you judge a politician in this country.
Absolutely not.
Jim Alister's listening. You give this man a free book, he'll say, and give his book a wonderful
review, Jim Alister. Alistair,
he will
yeah.
vote TUV. He can't but he will. He come up and vote TUV.
Yeah, that's going to happen, all right. Which would you have voted for?
By the way, Jim, you should read his book. It's a very good book.
If you were North Antrim, would you vote for Jim Alistair or Ian Paisley?
That's a tough question. Yeah. By the way, completely off topic, but somebody told me the reason that Jim Alistair is quite a powerful and extreme unionist, that his family were from Monaghan and had to move partition.
Okay, right, yeah.
Yeah. I need to research that slightly more.
I presume you're having Jim.
No, somebody told me. I was told that. I don't know.
Jim
Alistair's family apparently from Monaghan. And, there was
that did happen.
A certain historian told me that a lot of the unionists who moved from the 3 counties to the 6 counties, a very good historian, you would know, that they became slightly more extreme unionists when they had, because they were forced to move and stuff like that, and that may explain.
You should get Jim Alistair on your Give Him a Head.
We've invited Jim, and he hasn't replied, or his people have not replied, but we will have him on.
I can jump in on this one.
Can we jump in? Jim?
This is a quick Google search tells us that Jim Alistair, the leader of the traditional unionist voice, was born in County Down. His parents, Robert and Mary Jane Alistair, were originally from County Monaghan, specifically the townland of Lee, south of Monaghan town, and they moved from County Monaghan to County Down in 1949 or 1950. So we don't have the reason yet.
Long after partition,
But that's good while after partition,
Wow. So I was partly right there.
You're partly right. Yeah, but still, they moved. But why did they feel they had to move in 1949, 50? That's interesting as well. Because at the time, that was when Ireland became a republic, the 26 counties, and there was a lot of anti-partition protests and talks and events. So it definitely were extreme activity, anti-partition talks at the time. So maybe it's something to do with that.
But we can say that Jim Alistair's parents are free staters.
Yeah, you can, yeah. And he celebrates an event that happened in a foreign country. In a foreign country. Battle of the Bond.
One quick last story before we end this episode that I think is worth noting. It's an Irish news article about the brutality of treatment against the Birmingham Six bombings prisoners. The Birmingham pub bombings prisoners, with the life sentences imposed on those arraigned for the Birmingham pub bombings, which caused the deaths of 21 people. The story of this grisly Holocaust can said to be ended. But what did emerge during the trial was evidence that while in custody, the prisoners were savagely beaten for long periods during interrogation. This is quite a long article from the Irish News. Clearly, the prisoners, the Birmingham Six, were beaten up. But what's interesting is that the Irish News at the time appears to accept the decision of the British court, accept that these people were guilty. And I think most people did. And you're looking back now with hindsight, obviously, we now know that the Birmingham Six were completely innocent. But it took a long time for that campaign from the mid-70s to go, not just for these guys beaten up. Clearly the confessions were beaten out and the forensic evidence was nonsense and they got the wrong guys. But it's interesting, even the Irish News in 1975 was suggesting, well, probably did it, shouldn't have beaten them up in custody, but they accepted the conviction.
It is interesting, I'm playing devil's advocate for the Irish News. At the time, you would expect that the justice would have been upheld. Obviously, what was happening with the prisoners was shocking. The way they were beaten up and the way they were treated. But you would like to think that the justice system in Britain was robust enough that justice was done. Had there been many other miscarriages of justice before that you could
I was going to say, now in 2025, nobody trusts anybody or anything, every single institution, whether the church, the royal family, the courts, everybody. But back in 1975 here, even the Irish News is going, well, the British justice system wouldn't convict 6 fellas for nothing. That's the assumption, and there haven't. I think you're right. There haven't been very many sort of well-known miscarriages of justice, and I think there was an appeal. I can't remember when the first appeal was. It took a long time. Chris Mullins and various people wrote a book. There were investigations. There were documentaries. It took a long time. They eventually got an appeal, which was rejected. The first appeal was rejected
absolutely
by Lord Denning, who said even if these men weren't guilty, it would be an appalling vista. I think you described.
I think that was in the early 80s. That appeal was
appalling vista that courts would lie and the police would lie to the court, and men who were innocent would be convicted. That couldn't even conceive of the notion. And to be fair, here you are, 50 years ago, the Irish News. I'm not to blame the Irish News.
The Irish News is very critical of the way the prisoners are handled here.
Of course,
but it does seem to accept that the conviction is correct. Which we obviously know isn't the case. But again, yeah, it comes back to what was there other massive miscarriages of justice perpetrated by the courts, at that time, so I can't recall. Maybe there was, and maybe our listeners might remind of some. But like obviously, you've heard of wrong convictions of murders and all that.
Yeah.
People had to be posthumously pardoned, and that was happening. Throughout the century, there were people wrongly convicted and hanged for crimes they didn't. Remember John Christie? Remember John Christie killed all the people, and Timothy Evans was hanged instead of him in the 50s in Britain. John Christie was a serial killer, but the man was wrongly convicted of murders that John Christie committed. And that was big news in the 50s, maybe 60s even. So there have been wrongful convictions for murder and the likes, but I think that was the that was the first big case, the Birmingham Six, and then the Guildford Four happening in tandem with it as well. That was really a story for the 80s.
Yeah,
on into the 90s.
And I think it was a shock to the system. That people did kind of think, and again, I mean, because of the nature of the atrocity and the outrage, most people think, well, they wouldn't have got the wrong guys, and they were Irish guys in Birmingham. Just, the police wouldn't do that, surely. And
maybe just weren't as skeptical, but why wouldn't they do that? Of course they would do that. They would absolutely get scapegoats. They would absolutely take it out on someone if they were, at a dead end with a particular crime. And there was easy targets there. Considering the outrage at these bombs, that's what they did. They got scapegoats, and they were very quick to get scapegoats and to pin it on them.
Yeah, there's almost not quite an acceptance now. They've clearly condemned the brutality, but they do put it in the context of, there was outrage in Britain at the time. And, maybe the lower, I think they describe it as some of the lower ranks involved, might have been guilty of slapping the boys about, but surely, senior officers would have put a stop to it.
But the chief superintendent was lying through his teeth in court, saying that absolutely no confessions were forced out of these people, and they were not beaten up and brutally as they claimed. Yeah.
And the Irish News clearly condemning the appalling slaughter of the two Birmingham pubs as well. But it's interesting that they kind of, that this was in 1975.
Oh, it is interesting.
That even the Irish News needed to be convinced that these people were innocent.
But, absolutely, yeah. But again, it goes back to it's very easy for us for the hindsight when we know what happened now. But of course, at the time,
Captain Hindsight, is that not your job? Hindsight, just look.
That's what I'm saying. But it's easy for us now to do that. But it's 50 years ago, Irish News would not have been in that position. So it's understandable to a large degree.
Okay, so
before you go, guys, I think you shouldn't ignore your audience, or indeed, should I say, your fans.
Oh, fans!
Yeah, lots of comments coming in on the YouTube channel, and indeed, someone, Philip, who was at the live show at St Mary's, and he said he really enjoyed it. So good on Philip for commenting there. But I want you to pick up on a couple of the other comments because you were discussing the Civil War in a previous episode. And a comment here from someone who's styled themselves the Last Angry Man on YouTube. And they say, it's hard to evaluate these things objectively at a distance of more than a century. But my great-grandfather fought in the War of Independence but didn't participate in the Civil War as he didn't wish to fight against his former comrades. His brother was also active then and chose to enroll in the Free State Army. Others chip in to say there were quite a few on both sides who didn't want to fight. And then he comes back to say, and I don't know what you make of this one, it also seems as if most, if not all of the women in the Republican movement chose the anti-treaty side. I guess many being widows or relatives of people who had died in the War of Independence. So any evidence there about women being more anti-treaty?
The Cumann na mBan was the first body to come out against the treaty. Public body in February 22. All six, there were six out of 124 TDs, and six of them are women. All six were anti-treaty. They were definitely, and there was a lot of language, very sexist language used against the women frothing at them out.
Yes,
and
I was going to say there was some writing saying that women were basically at the forefront of
causing men
fomenting the Irish Civil War and waving shrouds about dead husbands and stuff and goading the men into taking up arms again against other Irishmen.
But there was a group called Cumann na Saoirse that was formed. There was a breakaway of Cumann na mBan, which was pro-treaty. And that would include, people like Bridget Cole, who was Kevin O'Higgins' wife, Jennifer Wise Power. So they weren't as strong in numbers by any stretch of imagination than the Republican coming them on. But it is fair to say, most Republican women were anti-treaty.
Do I get to talk about my great aunt again?
If you have to.
My great aunt Catherine O'Hara, who was in Cumann and was very anti-treaty, and who
was she around in the 20s as well? Was she?
Yeah.
She would have been. Yeah. I know she was interned in the Second World War, but
no.
She would have been active.
That's what they're
Joe McKelvey. She was
her claim to fame was she was
the
the fiancée of Joe McKelvey, who was anti-treaty and was executed by the Free State in December 1922, and she ended up with his uniform. Long story, but she was Cumann from the very beginning. He was anti.
Where was she based? She was
based
Belfast.
in Belfast. Yeah. Now again, family rumours said she sent messages back to Michael Collins, but I think everybody in Ireland at that time who was
claiming
claimed they did messages for Michael Collins. So it's all a bit obscure, obviously, and because she was anti-treaty, she never got to write down what she did or claim a pension. She didn't claim a pension from down south, because she was anti-treaty.
Some were so Republican they wouldn't claim a pension.
They wouldn't claim a pension for their role and she was living in the north at the time, so it wouldn't have been a good idea to tell everybody what you did during the War of Independence. But she was totally anti-treaty right up until her death. She was, she was hanging around with the IRA and the remnants of the IRA and was interned during the Second World War. But she was, single-minded and that completely anti-treaty.
Yeah, even Mary McSweeney, Terence McSweeney, who had died in hunger strike in October 1920. She became TD and she was always extreme Republican. Really anti-treaty all her life. Disagreed with Fianna Fáil being formed, disagreed with Fianna Fáil going into the Dáil, all of these things. So she was one of the loudest voices you could say from the anti-treaty, and only accepting the last legitimate Dáil was second Dáil.
Yes.
There's a lot of people.
I think there's still 6 fellas in a bar in Derry who agree with that. What's left of them?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I say 6, 4 of them are touts. But no, it's interesting that there were a lot of men, and a lot of, not just men, sorry, there were a lot of people going, I could see which way this is going and didn't want to. I mean, that's why I have some sympathy with Michael Collins. He was desperate to try and avoid a civil war at that time and was trying to keep people together right up until the end when it became unavoidable. But there were a lot of men who going, walking away from this, presumably.
Oh, there was. I don't know if any studies been done. Can you go say people who fought the War of Independence, what percentage? Actually fought in the Civil War. There may have been. I haven't seen myself, but that would be interesting, to see because there was people. I know from my own study of Laois, the Revolution Laois, there were people who left after the War of Independence, and didn't get involved in the Civil War. But lots still did and took one side or the other, So, you'd like to think a lot more would have walked away. It's just an awful mess. The Civil War.
Yeah.
It was.
Friends falling out and brothers literally fighting. And,
exactly.
Michael Collins, Harry Boland was his great mate, wasn't it? Harry Boland, who was kind of in bits over the treaty and kind of.
Now, if you talk about Joe McKelvey being executed, the same day Rory O'Connor was executed, and he was best man at Kevin O'Higgins' wedding the year before.
Right.
And Kevin O'Higgins was Justice Minister. That was part of that decision to execute him.
To execute your own best man.
Execute your own best man.
It must have been an awful speech at the wedding.
That's a bit rough. Right?
Sorry, that's too facetious. I didn't mean that.
Seriously. Well, and De Valera was groomsman.
Was he?
Yeah, the wedding. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Just one final before you wrap up. Sorry to pick you up on something, Tim. You mentioned founder member of the SDLP, Eddie Hockey. I think Eddie Hockey was the founder of Norbrook Laboratories.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Unfortunately died in a helicopter crash, but you were probably referring to Dennis Hockey.
I do apologise. Yes, that's getting my hockeys mixed up. I do apologise. Yeah, definitely.
As long as you didn't mix them up with Charlie Hockey.
Yes, Dennis. Apologies to the hockeys. Is that it for this episode? I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that.
Next episode we'll be talking about Eamon De Valera.
Eamon De Valera, right.
50 years after his death.
Do you want to go for a dance?
A jazz dance.
That's it from this episode of the Irish History Boys. If you like and subscribe and follow us. Oh, by the way, I forgot to do the yes. If you like it, please feel free to send us a message or ask us a question. Get us in touch anytime on WhatsApp or email, WhatsApp message, or leave a voice note on 07483 313 842. Drop us an email at irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. And if you have any hard questions, I'll answer them. And if you have any easy questions, Cormac will answer them.
That sounds good.